Guys, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us
Thank
back.
you for having me.
Okay, that could actually happen. Like where you could be prosecuting, you could be defending. I feel like I'm going to get the exclusive if that happens, so that's exciting to me. Let's talk about Colorado. It really would be extraordinary. We haven't been paying much attention to it, but Colorado, that's a critical swing state. And if they can manage to keep him off the ballot, it would be huge in Colorado, but it would be tried immediately in several other states. And there are efforts already underway in other states to get him off the ballot because the 14th Amendment reads in part, no person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the U.S., who, having previously taken an oath as an officer of the U.S. to support the Constitution, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. So if you're not allowed to hold office, civil or military, at the federal level, or otherwise, frankly, if you previously took an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, and then you went on to engage in an insurrection, or you gave aid to our enemies. This is what they're using to say Donald Trump did that. The insurrection, that's what the left says January 6th was. And they say nothing really needs to be done. It's self-executing. Like that's what the 14th Amendment says. That's what he did. It's done. The Secretary of State of Colorado should remove him if he wins the nomination from all the ballots. She's a Democrat who would love to take his name off the ballots. She's made that clear publicly, but she says, I will wait until the judge tells me what to do. So thumbs up on that, because that's how this should work. And there is a judge trial, a bench trial happening right now in Colorado to figure out whether this can happen. The judge out there is named Judge Sarah B. Wallace, State District Court Judge. She doesn't appear to love Republicans. She donated $100 in 2022 to Act Blue, which is a group that says its goal is to, quote, eliminate Republicans currently in national office from Colorado. So she's not a Trump fan, Mike Davis. She's not a fan. However, let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say she can interpret the law irrespective of her politics. And how do you think this case is likely to come down? It's being tried right now.
Well, I'm out here in Denver watching this trial in the courtroom all week. I'm taking a break now to come talk to you on this show. But I'll tell you, is this Denver District Court Judge Sarah Wallace was just appointed by the. She was named in August of 2022 by the Colorado Democrat governor, and effective January of 2023. And 2 months after she was named, but before she became a judge, she donated to this group called the Colorado Turnout Project. And the Colorado Turnout Project's specific mission is to remove Republicans from office who supported President Trump on January 6th, right? So how the hell can she donate to an anti-Trump January 6th group and then sit on a trial this week preside over a trial that's trying to throw President Trump off the ballot based upon what he did on January 6th? That is an obvious conflict of interest. President Trump's lawyers raised this issue on Monday morning when they found this donation. And she said, don't worry about it. I can be fair, right? Well, guess what? That's not the legal standard, as both you and Dave know. It doesn't matter whether she subjectively thinks that she can be fair when you're dealing with recusal issues. It's whether objectively the public thinks that she can be fair. And I don't think any objective human being would think a judge could be fair on a January 6th trial to throw Trump off the ballot when she donated to a January 6th group to throw Republicans out of office who supported President Trump. So that's a very, that's reversible error right there. I presume that she's going to rule in favor of these Democrats who are trying to throw President Trump off the ballot. This is an election challenge in Colorado, so it's immediately appealable to the Colorado Supreme Court. The Colorado Supreme Court has been stacked with left-wing activists. So I don't think there's any chance that President Trump wins there. All these dirtballs from New York and California have moved into Colorado and destroyed my beloved Colorado so they can smoke weed. And so
Dave, these are your people.
The Supreme Court, That's right. Just stay home, people. So now I think the Supreme Court of the United States, which has discretionary review, I think they're going to have to put on their big boy pants and actually take a Trump case with their lifetime tenure and pay protection. I hope they find the courage to do their job here, and they're going to have to fix this because other states are going to use this Colorado precedent. States like Michigan are going to point to Colorado as precedent and try to take Trump off the ballot in other swing states around the country.
I mean, that would be huge. It would be huge for both sides, Dave, if he actually couldn't get on the ballot, if he wins the nomination, but cannot get on the ballot in these critical swing states or some handful of them. That's ball game. It does feel like lawfare. So can you speak to the judge's alleged conflicts of interest here?
Good to be back with you, Megyn, and with my friend Mike. First off, I don't think Colorado is a swing state, just as an initial matter. In fact, I don't see this happening in any true swing states. It's only about 6 swing states, and Colorado is pretty blue. But let's talk about the judge. You know, I understand that it doesn't look good that the judge gave money to Act Blue, which is just like the general clearinghouse for Democratic candidates. I mean, Act Blue is what all of us Democrats would give to. We give to Act Blue. I wouldn't read that much into it. She's trying to destroy the Republican Party, but I admit that it doesn't look good, but neither does the fact that Judge Cannon in the Trump case was appointed by Donald Trump. The standard for accusing a judge is really high. It's a high burden, and she's not going to be recused, and nor should Judge Cannon be recused for the case, even though Donald Trump appointed her to the bench. Or when this eventually gets to the Supreme Court, if Colorado rules if the judge rules to bump him off the ballot, I do think it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, where there are 3 justices appointed by Donald Trump. And ultimately, they are going to rule, in my view, that you can't use this process to remove a candidate for president off the ballot for a few reasons. Number one, he hasn't been charged with insurrection. Number 2, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is not that clear that it applies to the president. It applies to others, but doesn't say the president. And so I think that this, in the end, will not be the reason why Donald Trump is not in the White House. If he is not returned to the White House, won't be because of this. It'll be because the voters have spoken.
Oh, so he's conceding the argument, Mike. A surprise twist for the audience at home. They agree that Trump should not be bounced off the ballot because of the 14th Amendment thing. Can I ask you about that? Because there has been some legal debate about whether the 14th Amendment applies to somebody. Because, the full textual version, I read a version with my own ellipses just to make it easier for people to follow. The longer version, disqualification from holding office, has other language, like no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress. All right, he's not running for that. Or elector of president or vice president. He's not running to be an elector. But then we get to or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States. So why wouldn't that apply to the president? Well, is it not a civil or military office to be the commander-in-chief and president, Dave?
It could, but legal scholars are in dispute over this. It's not, I didn't say it wouldn't necessarily apply. I said it's not clear. And I think that is just another reason why ultimately this United States Supreme Court, 6-3 conservative majority with 3 justices appointed by Donald Trump, they're not going to remove him from the ballot. So I would agree with you guys that this is not going to happen. And as far as whether it should happen, I've never been a big fan of this argument. I think there are a lot of reasons not to put him back in the White House, but I don't think this is the best one.
What's happening out there, Mike? I'm interested in your feelings because it seems to be an effort to persuade this judge who already seems very anti-J6 and what happened. Not that anybody's in support of what happened on January 6th, but to persuade her that it was just as horrible as she's heard, it was even worse. What I read is that they started with opening statements, then a U.S. Capitol police officer who was on the, quote, front lines of the, quote, violent assault. And then, I mean, truly one of my least favorite Democrats. And there's a long list on both sides who I can't stand. But Representative Eric Swalwell, I'm sorry, but he is like, I try never to mention him. I do both parties the service of never, if I can avoid it, mentioning their worst people, because I just think my audience hates them all and doesn't want to hear about them. But audience, I'm sorry. He showed up and testified in the trial, so we're talking about him. He recounted the horrors of the January 6th day and the riot. So, Mike, what does all of that add up to? Just heartstrings or what? Insurrection? You have to convince her there was one?
Well, and here's the issue. The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868, and there's actually a case on point dealing with disqualification of these Civil War insurrectionists. It's from 1869. The Chief Justice at the time, Samuel Chase, held that in order to disqualify under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, to disqualify for insurrection or rebellion, it's not self-executing. Congress has to pass a federal criminal statute, which Congress did in 1870. There's an insurrection or rebellion federal criminal statute on the books since 1870. It was last updated in 1948. So if you want to get President Trump thrown off the ballot, you can't go to a partisan Secretary of State or some goofball biased judge in Denver, Colorado. You have to have a U.S. attorney bring federal charges in federal court. You have to have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to have a unanimous federal jury find him guilty, a federal judge convict, and it has to be upheld on appeal. If that happens, then under this federal statute that was passed pursuant to Section 5 of the 14th Amendment to enact Section 3, then you can disqualify him. Short of that, you cannot disqualify, right? The January 6th committee spent tens of millions of dollars looking for this evidence. Jack Smith has spent tens of millions of dollars looking for this evidence. There is no evidence of an insurrection because it does not exist, right? What happened on January 6th was a lawful protest permitted by the National Park Service that devolved into a riot. It got out of control and turned into a riot.
I want to say this, just going back and looking at it, Colorado's been blue for a while, but I would say it's definitely not as blue as, like my home state of New York or New Jersey and so on. Like it's been in play. It's certainly on the lower levels. And we've been watching the Senate races very carefully there over the past couple of cycles. But Michigan, Dave, Trump won Michigan in 2016, which is also getting ready. They actually have a challenge right now that Trump is trying to get rid of. Minnesota, that's a state Trump lost to Hillary by, I think, 1.5%, 1.6%. So it was tight, so this Colorado ruling, especially if it goes up to SCOTUS, could actually have a big impact on these other states. So we do need to watch it. It's also a similar challenge filed in New Hampshire and so on. So I can see why the Trump campaign doesn't like these lawsuits and that it's important for them to win them, even though they don't think, they probably agree with you that they're not likely to prevail. Okay, let's talk about what's happening in New York, because this guy, this judge he's a piece of work. He obviously cannot stand Donald Trump and is not afraid to show it. So this is the case. Do you want to explain it, Dave? It's basically the state attorney general going after the Trump organization and Trump, saying he and in particular his two sons, overstated the Trump company assets in order to get bank loans at more favorable rates than he would have gotten if he had valued the assets of his company more accurately. But no one's claiming he didn't pay the loans back or that the banks somehow got screwed. The banks aren't complaining. So Trump all along has been saying, no, there's no victim. What he tweeted out or truthed out was, there's no victim except me, Because, he's losing this case. This judge hates him. So this is wrapping up now. How do you see this case going?
It's pretty much over already, Megyn, because the Judge Engoron, ruled via summary judgment that the fraud occurred. He's liable. Now this is more about damages than about whether he did it. There are some other measures that they're going to have to deal with, but for the most part, this case has already been decided. It's just how bad it's going to be for Trump. And now this week, Trump's children are going to have to start testifying. And this really bothers Trump deeply because his business is himself. This is something he cares about more than you could even say the criminal cases, because it strikes at the heart of who he is. And so that's why he shows up to court and he lashes out against this judge, which is really not a smart move because the judge is the decision maker. There's no jury here. And the reason why there's no jury is because Trump's own lawyer, Alina Habba, didn't check the box for a jury trial. So he has only his own team to blame for it. But in the end, I think it's going to go poorly for Trump. I think he'll probably get fined the maximum amount, $250 million. This is about inflating the value of your assets including, by the way, his apartment in New York. It's one thing to say, hey, it's a rounding error, or hey, we're just estimating it wrong. Well, when you're estimating your apartment being 3 times the size of the actual size, that's fraud. So that's what they're saying. You can't do this to get bigger bank loans. You can't do this to get bigger insurance policies, and at the same time deflating your property values like they've done with Mar-a-Lago to get better tax rates, because for Mar-a-Lago, they estimated their property is worth between 18 and 28 million. And the judge used that figure, and it so upset Trump, and Trump was pissed off at the judge for it. But then the judge was like, hey, I'm basing my estimate on your own figures that you gave to the Palm Beach County property appraiser. So this is why he's on trial. And I think it's going to be a negative ruling for him when the damages verdict comes out.
I think we're going to reach another point of agreement here, Mike. Do you also predict it's going to be a negative ruling for Donald Trump by this judge?
Of course it is, but I think I need to correct a couple of things. I don't think that there's not a jury trial because Elena Haba didn't check the box. I think this is a New York civil enforcement matter by the Attorney General's office where there's not an option for a jury, which is a head scratcher to me because that seems to violate the 7th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, because this Tish James is seeking $250 million in damages. I don't know how you can seek $250 million in damages and not have a jury under the 7th Amendment to the Constitution. And also on the valuation of Mar-a-Lago, you know this better than anyone. You're down there, Dave, but I thought that there is a law that the property assessment can't go up more than a certain percentage each year. And that's why Mar-a-Lago under the assessor's value is like $18 million. But as you know, a tennis court at Mar-a-Lago is worth more than $18 million. The property down there is extremely expensive. You have prime real estate on the intercoastal waterway to the ocean. I think that to say that that's only worth $18 million in this fraud case is silly. There's a difference between how your property is assessed by the tax collector and what you pay for property taxes versus what it's actually worth.
How about that, Dave?
Yes, well, there's a deed restriction on Mar-a-Lago. So you can't build high rises there. You're limited to how you can use the property. It has to be used as a social club, which is why you wouldn't get $1.5 billion on the open market for it. But point taken that it's definitely worth more than $28 million. That is a beautiful property. But the reason why it's valued at $28 million, it's because Trump in 2020, his representatives asked the property appraiser's office to keep it at that amount. They wanted that lower figure because they could pay less in taxes. And so now when Trump is bashing Judge Engoron for using that figure, I think that he's hoist by his own petard, to use a Shakespearean phrase from Hamlet. It's that's a figure that he agreed with. And that's why he's on trial there, is because on one side, he's saying, look how little the properties are worth for tax purposes, but look how much they're worth to get bank loans. And the fact that no one was hurt is really not a matter, because in New York, you don't have to have a victim to be charged with fraud. And besides,
You're
you
right.
could
Well,
actually
that I've had to say is an absurdity. Like the as a lifelong New York stater, that law needs to change. It's absurd, but it's on the books and it's enforceable. And that's what the voters of New York have chosen. And Letitia James is an AG who's a true blue Democrat who would love to get Trump, promised to get Trump as she was running for office a couple times. And so this is where we are. I mean, she has the right to go after him because the law is what it is, Mike. And it looks to me like Judge Engoron, who already gave Trump a defeat in the summary judgment motion in large part, is now going to give him a second blow when he finds against him at the end of this case. However, Trump is scoring some points. I actually do think it's not totally foolhardy of him to go out there and criticize this judge who's already, the cake is baked. He knows. He has no chance of persuading him. But what happened with Michael Cohen on the stand this week was kind of interesting. And I heard both sides arguing about Michael Cohen. But when I saw that Tish James came out and said, well, he's not our star witness, then I knew exactly how badly it had gone for her, right? Like you don't have the AG saying things like that unless it went terribly for her. So Michael Cohen, do you want to tell us what happened, Mike, or would you like me to summarize it?
You may want to summarize it.
Okay, so here's what happened. Michael Cohen, who is Trump's former fixer, was like his consigliere because he was more than a lawyer. He was like I don't know, his henchman. I mean, he would just do whatever Trump wanted him to do. He took the stand. But this is a guy who's already a convicted felon. He's served time. And so that's never ideal for any prosecutor or any lawyer bringing this guy to the stand. And in this case, AG Letitia James and her people, I'm sure, weren't too thrilled about Michael Cohen's status as a convicted felon. So he gets up there and takes the stand. And he tries to say first, I have it in front of me, stand by, that Trump had asked him to increase the total assets based on a number that Trump arbitrarily chose. Like, you got to get my assets up so I can get this bank loan. Then on Wednesday, last week, he gave combative testimony in the face of cross-examination after he had implicated Trump, as I just stated, saying he told me to increase the assets. And he said, again, that Trump had directed him to reverse engineer financial statements to increase his net worth. So same, Tuesday and Wednesday, he's going after Trump saying he's a bad guy. He told me to do bad stuff. Then Trump attorney Alina Habak pressed Cohen about earlier testimony he had given that contradicted those two statements. In particular, he gave sworn testimony in 2019 in front of Congress. And when he was asked whether Trump at that time had directed him to inflate numbers for Trump's personal statements, he said, "Not that I recall, no." Then Alina Habak, Trump's lawyer, said, "Oh, well, that doesn't seem entirely consistent with what you just told this court on Tuesday and Wednesday." And Trump admitted that he had been lying in his testimony back in 2019 before Congress. Oh, it's a record scratch. All right, already, this is bad. Letitia James is sitting in the pews thinking, my God, no, with the rest of the audience. She's not actually trying the case. After lunch, another Trump attorney pressed Cohen further on that deceitful congressional testimony. And Cohen, over the lunch break, changed his testimony, now saying that earlier testimony actually was not false. And then Trump's lawyer said, "So Mr. Trump never asked you to inflate the numbers on his financial statement." And Cohen's now answer was correct. So he's going with, first he says, he told me to do it. Then they say, you didn't say that at your 2019 congressional testimony. Then he says, well, I was lying then. Then he comes back on the stand and says, actually, I was lying just when I said I was lying then, because actually he never did tell me to do it. I mean, it's this guy, he can't even keep his lies straight. And that is what led Trump to abruptly leave the courtroom and declare victory outside the courtroom, saying the witness just admitted that we won the trial, that he never asked me to do any of this, that he did it. And, no one's going to trust Michael Cohen. That's when Letitia James came out and said, oh, he's not our main witness. He's not our main witness. But the judge did not strike Cohen's testimony. The judge did not rule in Trump's favor on this point, Mike, because he said there's a mountain of evidence that supports the idea that you, like a mob boss, didn't have to give the order directly. You could do it with your eyes. You could do it with a wave of a hand. I'm giving this judge a better accent than he actually has. And when they asked for a verdict in their favor, he said, absolutely denied. So what do you make of Michael Cohen's role, his recurring role, frankly, in Trump's legal troubles, Mike?
I think Michael Cohen may have realized that, oh crap, the statute of limitations is like 5 years for perjury to Congress. And this is 2019 testimony. We're in 2023. Crap, I could be charged for perjury to Congress. So maybe I should fix that. So I think Michael Cohen's testimony was disastrous for Tish James. It just shows that the wheels have fallen off the clown car in this New York fraud case. And let's just step back and remember this. How is it fraud for a businessman to pay back sophisticated Wall Street banks in full, on time, as agreed, with interest? I'm still trying to get my head around this idea that somehow these sophisticated Wall Street banks were defrauded by President Trump. And I'm trying to get my head around the fact that somehow the public was defrauded by these transactions between these sophisticated Wall Street banks and Trump.
Well, and he also had disclaimers in all of his loan applications and his financial statements, Dave, saying, do your own homework, kick the tires on your own. These are my representations, but you've got to figure it out for yourselves. And these were not podunk, ma and pa investors. It was Citibank. It was huge banks that have due diligence teams and this is why they're not complaining. They understand perfectly well that they were not victimized by Trump.
Well, first, as we discussed, the law doesn't require there to be victims. But secondly, you could say that they were victimized because had they had accurate numbers, they wouldn't have given Trump as favorable a rates as they got. They would have made more money. So in that sense, they were victimized. Plus, the disclaimers that he gave were pretty vague. It wasn't like he said, hey, these are fraudulent numbers. We're making them up. It reminded me when I went after Miss Cleo years ago. You remember the Jamaican Shango shaman, late night psychic?
Miss Cleo, what'd she do?
Well, I was the guy who took her down. That was my claim to fame.
I don't like Dave anymore.
No, we used to call him all the time, Mike. Remember that?
Call me now.
Late at night.
Well, on the screen, it would say, we're for real. We're psychics. We're for real. On the bottom, it would say for entertainment only. And that reminds me of Trump's disclaimers. It's like this little, disclaimer. It's kind of vague. That doesn't undo all the alleged fraud that's out there. So that's why, he's going to lose this case, if nothing more than the fact that, you've got a judge who clearly, by the fact that he said, what was the term he used?
Absolutely denied.
Right. When a judge tells you absolutely denied as opposed to denied, you're in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
So Dave, but put it in perspective, why? Because Trump does clearly care about this case very much. He does not have to be there, and he's showing up. 2 out of his 3 kids are showing up. And no, Ivanka's showing up too. She's been ordered to give testimony, though she was released as a defendant. She's coming next week. As a practice, I read the penalties that he's facing here, and they're absolutely draconian. He's not gonna be able to do business at all. They're saying they want to permanently prevent Trump and his sons from running any New York companies. That Judge Engoron already stripped the Trumps of control over their signature New York properties. We talked about that once before. They want $250 million. And I don't know that Trump has $250 million. I know he says he's a billionaire and so on, but that doesn't mean he's liquid and can pay $250 million. So Dave, what do you think the stakes are here?
They're huge. This is a big reason why Trump's so upset. And there's talk that perhaps he could put the company in Ivanka's name if she's not, in the end, part of the final judgment because she's not named as a defendant. She was dropped from the case, as you correctly noted. Or he could set up shop in Florida, where he lives now. He's a resident there. But this will really strike to the heart of the Trump organization. This is really damaging to him. And you're right. I'm not sure he's liquid enough to pay a $250 million fine. I wonder if that could come from his supporters around the country who were eager to pay for his election defense when the money didn't really go for election defense. So we'll see what happens. But there's no doubt this is very potentially damaging for him, even though it does not involve potential incarceration.
Mike, he clearly cares about this one. To the outside world, it may feel like, his freedom's not in jeopardy, but his business is. The thing that made him famous is, right? This businessman in New York, he's declared bankruptcy before. I was in New York when it happened. They had those little coffee cans at your local coffee kiosk with like a help Trump as a joke because he declared bankruptcy, but he was still a millionaire. It was kind of it was a business decision. In any event, is there any chance that when Trump runs for office in November 2024, as a result of this case, he's not only going to be a potentially convicted felon, but a bankrupt one?
I don't know if you can discharge fraud damages in bankruptcy. So, this might be a case that has to get resolved by the Supreme Court of the United States as well on constitutional grounds. First of all, this judge just entered summary judgment before the trial even began. When there's conflicting evidence about the valuation of Mar-a-Lago, he just said, there's no conflicting evidence. This judge is such a goofball. He couldn't even pretend to be fair. He couldn't just wait until the end of the trial to rule how he was going to rule. He did it at the beginning of the trial because he's a goofball. He's a partisan hack. And then, like we discussed, there's no jury here when you're seeking $250 million in damages. So I don't know how that passes muster under the 7th Amendment. So there are some clear constitutional issues. Even if New York law is as screwed up as Dave says it is, I think that you might have a problem with the U.S. Constitution.
It almost certainly is. Having practiced law in New York for a long time, yes, my money is on it is as screwed up as Dave suggests. Stand by because there's much more happening in Trump world and elsewhere. We're going to pick up a couple of other cases, non-Trump related, right after the break. Don't go away. Freelance work is booming. So many people are taking the leap and starting their own business. But how do you maximize your earnings, minimize your taxes, and make sure you are legally compliant? It can be overwhelming, confusing, and it can take time away from your own billable hours. That's where the experts at collective.com come in. Collective was built specifically for businesses of one that are making over $60,000 in profit a year. Collective handles all of your back office work so you can focus on your passion, not your paperwork. And they can tell you how they can backdate your S-Corp to save you thousands on taxes this year. They handle business formation and compliance paperwork, taxes, business keeping, bookkeeping, accounting, and even payroll. Check out collective.com/Megyn to potentially save you thousands of dollars. And to sweeten the deal, they will also throw in an extra $100 off when you use my link. But you've got to do it soon. Collective.com/Megyn, Megyn, to get started with your personal team of self-employed tax experts.
If you've never had a reading from a real psychic, try us right now for free. Your father had a stroke at a young age, did he not?
Right.
Did you get strep throat a great deal in your late teen years?
Yes, I did.
Okay. His eyes are almost spooky. They're so pretty.
That would be my ex-boyfriend.
The 5 of swords is next to him, and that means that he is away.
Yep.
Did you think Cleo wasn't going to see that?
Oh, I knew you were.
Oh, you go, girl.
Dave.
Good for Danny.
Hey, hats off to my team. That actually was Debbie Murphy, of course, Canadian Debbie, who found Miss Cleo, who you put out of business. Atone, sir, atone. Look how she helped that young woman with her boyfriend problems.
Right. The thing about Miss Cleo, and kudos to Debbie for finding that, is that she was a Jamaican Shango shaman psychic who is neither Jamaican nor a Shango shaman psychic. Everything was a fake.
Is her name Cleo?
No, that was her stage name. It was Yuri Del Harris.
Spectacular. Not guilty. Love it. See, Mike, Dave has done some good in the world. Okay, I want to finish up with one Trump thing before we move on to a couple of others. And that is the gag order. He's been gagged in the New York State case that we just discussed too about his business. Whatever. The judge doesn't want him making fun of the judge's law clerk who's pretending to be a judge sitting right next to Judge Erdogan. What? I don't care that much about that one. Trump's not really listening. He's getting fined $5,000 and then $10,000. Good luck to that guy if he tries to put Trump in jail as he's threatening. Not going to happen. But the one in the D.C. federal case is more interesting, Mike. So the January 6th case brought by Jack Smith in D.C. about the alleged insurrection, not to be mistaken with the federal case about the documents at Mar-a-Lago. The one in D.C. is being tried by Judge Chutkan, who really doesn't like Trump. That's been clear. She's been very, very, very hard on all J6 defendants. And she's implemented a gag order on him that even now the ACLU has stepped in to challenge as in violation of the First Amendment, his right to speak and the public's right to hear him. So what is happening with that gag order, and what's your opinion of it?
Yeah, just a side note, Judge Chutkan even denied the ACLU's ability to file an amicus brief. So she just doesn't want to hear it at all. So this Obama DC judge, Tanya Chutkan, has teamed up with this Biden special counsel, Jack Smith, to put this unconstitutional gag order on a criminal defendant. If there is anyone in America who needs the First Amendment right to speak out, it is a criminal defendant. And to speak out against the prosecutor, against the judge, against the court staff, against the process. That is clearly protected by the First Amendment. This is an illegal prior restraint on President Trump's First Amendment rights. The First Amendment protects Americans, including criminal defendants, not the government, including Jack Smith's bruised ego. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the criminal defendants' right to a fair trial, not Jack Smith's right to a fair trial. And the local criminal rule to which Jack Smith and Judge Tanya Chutkan cite, I think it's 57.7, talks about protecting the accused, the defendants. And so they started doing these gag orders on these criminal defendants with Roger Stone. And this is a very dangerous precedent. They're saying they're trying to do this so they can protect witnesses from intimidation. There are federal criminal statutes on the books right now for obstruction of justice. including witness intimidation. So if they think President Trump is intimidating witnesses or intimidating court staff or intimidating the prosecutor, charge him under the criminal statutes, but don't put this unconstitutional prior restraint on his First Amendment rights.
What do you make of it, Dave?
I have to disagree with my friend Mike. Judge Chutkan implemented a partial gag order. She said that if Donald Trump wants to criticize the Biden administration and call this a political persecution, he can do so. He just can't intimidate witnesses. He can't go after and start attacking prosecutors and the judge, because you do so, you put people's lives at risk. And look, this is not unprecedented. SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, is also subject to a gag order. Roger Stone, as Mike said, was subject to one. And look, I've never seen any criminal defendant in my jurisdiction use such inflammatory language. And I can tell you that if anyone did, they would be in jail. The fact is that Judge Chutkan stayed her limited order to allow Trump to appeal. And then only after he attacked Mark Meadows, an important witness, in his social media post, then it was re-implemented. So he's been given a lot of the benefit of the doubt because he's a former president running for president again. And I think this gag order strikes the right balance here.
All right. So you mentioned Sam Bankman-Fried. I wanted to touch on that case too, because that's expected to go to the jury, I think today, Wednesday. He's been tried for conspiracy to commit several versions of fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, you name it, which has a little bit less of a legal burden than proving just fraud, than making it just a pure fraud case. These are conspiracy counts to commit fraud. The star witness, but there have been a few of his top emissaries within his crypto company, FTX, was his ex-girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, and she took the stand and blamed it all on him. And basically what he's accused of doing is having this crypto exchange, FTX, and this hedge fund investment firm called Alameda. And his girlfriend was running Alameda. And Alameda wasn't making very good investments. Things were going south as the crypto market was deeply troubled. And instead of just being honest about that and giving investors bad news, they started borrowing funds from FTX and the crypto exchange. That's a no-no. And apparently there was a big meeting. She testified about it in Hong Kong. She held it with her friends. She looks about 14. To think of this woman hosting a big meeting of all the Alameda hedge fund people, saying to them, the shit hit the fan and we kind of had to borrow some money from FTX. And then some of the FTX people wanted their money back and we don't have it to give, so that's bad. Anyway, she's blaming it all on Sam, saying this is all Sam's idea. This is his vision. And that's pretty good testimony for the prosecution, Dave. His lawyers are painting him as a hapless kind of doofus who didn't know what he was doing, wasn't committing fraud so much as negligent management of a business. Do you think there's any chance this jury is going to buy that?
No, I don't think he helped himself on the stand. He came across as arrogant and a doofus. I mean, he was asked to read something and he used like an infomercial voice, and it really came across like a Miss Cleo voice, right? Exactly. Came across that he just wasn't taking it that seriously. I mean, these are serious charges. And then he tried to conflate what he did with just margin trading, which is where you borrow funds to trade. But that's not what he did. He was taking from accounts he wasn't allowed to take from. It wasn't really margin trading. And when they went after him on that, on cross-examination, he pulled a Bill Clinton and was like, well, it depends on what the definition of is type of thing. And it's not going to go well before the jury. I think he's headed for a conviction.
You know, the judge, Mike, said something like, I can't remember what the phraseology was, but something to the effect of, part of the problem here is Mr. Bankman-Fried has a unique way of answering the questions. And that does telegraph, and he was annoying, according to the lawyers and the journalists watching it. That doesn't bode well for the jury to like him, where you can see the judge is so irritated he has to make a comment like that. The other thing is, apparently on direct examination, he was loquacious, he was giving long answers, but they were reasoned and they had, a normal story arc to them. And then as soon as he got on cross, it was, I don't remember. I have no idea. I can't remember anything. He went right to, you tell me, does any jury buy that when somebody remembers everything on direct and then forgets it all when cross-examination starts?
This guy is a total scumbag, and I am pretty confident, very confident, that the jury is going to hate him, and it's not going to end well for him.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. And I think it's going to be a pretty quick verdict. He could be in jail for 20, 30, 40 years. Realistically, he could easily get a very hefty sentence. So we'll see. then we'll have to deal with his parents who are also taking the money, knowing about the problems with the company. Okay, last but not least, Israel. It's being accused, as it has been since it began fighting back after the terrorist attack on it, now of war crimes. I mean, repeatedly, some people are using those words against Israel. But today, the news is being dominated by an airstrike that happened yesterday in northern Gaza in the area of a large refugee camp. They were targeting a Hamas command and tunnel network that, as far as I can tell, is not in dispute. It was right there. And the Hamas and related officials say many were killed and wounded. Once again, we have no idea what the truth is because Hamas is a terrorist organization, like taking your death numbers from ISIS. But undoubtedly, some number of innocents, or at least civilians, were killed. Israel's military says it struck them, including a commander who helped plan the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel. And also, they effectively targeted those terror tunnels right underneath it, collapsing them and bringing them down. Wolf Blitzer had an Israeli military spokesperson on and pressed him, saying, "You knew there were innocent civilians there." The IDF spokesperson said, "This is the tragedy of war. We told them, move south." And Blitzer said, "You decided to drop the bomb anyway." The spokesman said, "We're doing everything we can to minimize civilian deaths. Sadly, the terrorists are hiding among civilians." Ian Bremmer and others now all over Twitter saying it's a war crime, Mike. But this is a war crime, clear, plain and simple. Do you agree?
I want these people to hear this clearly. They can go to hell. Israel just faced the worst terrorist attack imaginable. We had over 1,300 Israelis murdered, 31 Americans murdered. There are over 200 hostages that Hamas still has. They kidnapped, raped, tortured, and murdered women, children, babies, the elderly, and the disabled. There is a report that Hamas killed a husband and raped the wife while they baked the baby alive in the oven. So I do not want to hear anything from any of these terrorist sympathizers. The only thing Gazans should be thankful for is that Israel has shown so much restraint, because Hamas is using Gazans as human shields. Hamas does not give a damn about Gazans. They're committing war crimes, and Israel is well within its rights, clearly within its rights to respond. And Gaza is lucky that Israel has not wiped it off the face of the damn map.
You know, Dave, it is a war crime to use human shields. Nobody talks about, they go right to, Israel. You know, they don't talk about Hamas's daily war crimes.
Exactly. And Megyn, I want to thank you and Mike for being so strong and combating this misinformation with facts. You've been doing it for some time now. You know, the death count was yesterday, according to Hamas, was 400. And now today it's 50. This is what happens when you depend on an international terrorist group for your facts, for your information. The numbers will get revised. And look, no one wants any loss of innocent life, Israeli or Palestinian. But you are right. When it comes to international law, there is an international humanitarian law treaty. Article 58A actually says that parties to a conflict are required to remove the civilian population, individual civilians, and civilian objects under their control from the vicinity of military objectives. So Hamas purposely locates their military targets under hospitals and in civilian areas. And it's Israel who gets blamed when they try to send in troops and do anything but have wholesale massacres. They try to target and pinpoint the military. And sometimes, sadly, the innocent Palestinians get to be casualties of war. And that's awful. And no one wants that. But that's the blame Hamas. Hamas puts them in harm's way. So if there is an international war crime, it's on Hamas, not on Israel.
I got to spend a minute asking about what's happening on the college campuses and, in some instances, public protests on the streets off of the college campuses. We played last week what happened to this Jewish student at Harvard as he happened to walk by the, quote, die-in that these pro-Palestinian students were hosting. It wasn't enough for them to host their die-in in support of what happened to Israel. They actually chose to harass this Jewish student. We played what we had of the tape, but now more of it from a different angle, and right before the piece we played has been released, showing them physically laying hands on the guy and attacking him. Watch this.
Hey, sit. You're grabbing me.
Mike, we've seen them bring in the cops, consult with the FBI in Cornell, where that guy was just arrested. Some 21-year-old student was arrested for those disgusting death threats against Jews there, saying slit their throats. Turns out to be some engineering student. How about this? This is also a crime.
Yeah, I would say this. This is outrageous that it is just blatant open season on Jewish Americans all over the country, particularly on college campuses. And I would say this to the Biden Justice Department, to Kristen Clark, who is the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. Where the hell are you, Kristen? The Civil Rights Division has put out like 26 press announcements since October 7th, since Israel's most horrific terrorist attack imaginable. Not one of those, 0 of those 26 have dealt with these clearly illegal, under federal law, it is illegal. These are hate crimes that they are targeting Jewish people around America, including Jewish students on college campuses. Not one statement has been put out on this by the Civil Rights Division in the Justice Department. Where the hell is the Biden Justice Department on these anti-Semitic attacks across the country, including on college campuses?
What about it, Dave?
Well, that video you showed was so troubling. That kid was not attacked because he was Israeli. He was not showing an Israeli flag. He was attacked because he was Jewish. And if the administration at Harvard, my alma mater, does not act, then shame on them, because anti-Semitism is thriving on college campuses. And it's in part enabled because of weak administrators who are so scared to stand up to thugs like this. That is outrageous, what you just showed. And as far as the Biden administration, look, I can't speak to Kristen Clark because I'm not as familiar with it as Mike is, but I can tell you that President Biden has really been strong. His statements have been 100% on point. He has shown his support to Israel since this has happened in such a strong way that it looks like he's losing support amongst Arab constituents in Michigan. It could hurt his chances for re-election. So I'm hopeful that cooler heads will prevail and we will stand with our ally, our only democracy in the Middle East, and we'll do it on both sides of the aisle.
I know he's under increasing pressure from, I don't even know, the progressive flank, the progressive woke flank of his party. It's hard to identify who's falling in, but we know it's, some constituents who are sort of the wokesters of the party trying to push him to be more pro-Palestinians. So far, he's not going there. Mike and Dave, such a pleasure. What a great hour, you guys. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megyn.
Okay, we're going to be right back with more.